Alright, what's up, Internet? This past weekend was SoCal Regionals, and this was the first time I got the opportunity to play Soul Calibur 5. Now, word on the street is everyone who went to SoCal Regionals got sick, and I also got sick too. So, excuse me if I cough or, my voice sounds a little hoarse, but I was going to do a write up talking about my thoughts on the game and the event, and I just kind of feel shitty, so I thought I'd put together this video. Most of the people who are fans of the podcast are probably wondering what the deal is with uh, why I haven't recorded another podcast. First of all, before I get into Soul Calibur 5, the gameplay and my impressions of it, I wanted to let everyone know that I did record a podcast with Daishi Orashima, um, his translator, Mr. Yoshi-san, I forget his full name, Harada, and Michael Murray. All four of them were on the podcast. I recorded the podcast, and when I went to listen to it after I recorded it, the file was corrupted. And I was pretty fucking pissed, to be honest. Obviously, that was a relatively legitimate podcast, so I was pretty pissed. There was no way to retrieve the data because the file size was really small, and I was just infuriated. So that was that. I spoke to them, apologized for there was nothing I could do. I just recorded it in the same way that I always do, with the same programs, and it was just a fluke. And so they were real cool about it. In fact, Daishi himself told me that uh, that's really unfortunate because the end of the interview was really good, and he felt like the questions were really intense and stuff. So he's really busy, obviously, right now because the game is going to come out on January 31st. So hopefully he'll be able to come back and reschedule. But yeah, that was a real bummer, and that's why I haven't put out a podcast. Other than that, I've been just extremely busy. School just finished for me, and I work like retarded hours at the arcade, like 14-hour days and shit. So I just don't have the time right now. Excuse me. So hopefully I'll be able to record a few videos and upload them on the YouTube channel because recording a video like this takes me only a few minutes, and recording a podcast and editing a podcast it takes a long time. So anyway, all that shit said and done, I want to talk a little bit about my thoughts on Soul Calibur 5. So I got to SoCal Regionals on Saturday pretty early, and there was already a good amount of people playing. There were four stations. Unfortunately, the Soul Calibur setups were on at least 40-inch Samsung TVs, and all four of them had a significant amount of input delay. So even though I got a decent amount of time on the game, it was kind of hard to figure out whether the movement or game speed was as fast as people claimed it to be because the TVs had input delay. So that part is kind of foggy to me. I'm gonna have to play it more on a TV that's has less input delay to figure out exactly how stepping and blocking and all that stuff feels. But so I got there. There was a decent amount of players. There were a significant amount of solid Soul Calibur players. Let me think of who was there. Barry was there. I think he's from Canada. Ciernian was there from NorCal. No Face Killer was there. A lot of people that are solid, dedicated Soul Calibur players were there, and I thought there was going to be a lot more people there playing, but there was at least maybe 4 or 5 people per station, so you'd have to wait a decent amount of time to play. So I was thinking to myself, if I'm going to get any time to play this game, I'm going to have to figure out what character am I going to pick to be just super fucking cheap with so that I can win, so that I could get some time on the game to feel out the system. So initially I picked Valdo, and I knew this would happen. His move list is just completely upside down. I haven't thought of Soul Calibur in a competitive manner since 2009, so I'm pretty fucking rusty. And Valdo just seemed he's so complex that I thought this is not a good idea. But one thing I did notice about Valdo is that his movement is very, very sluggish. Um, Especially in blind stance, there's that quick step that you can do, which is down, down, or up, up. And his quick step is very slow, and his blind stance quick step is even slower. So I did notice that. But moving on, so the next character I picked was Siegfried, and I, I, I noticed that his 3B, it seems pretty good as far as on block. From what people were telling me, like Ice Cold Edge was there, he was saying that Siegfried's 3B is now frame trap with his Knight backstance K. So that's pretty good. But again, I felt like his backdash was really weak, and I just wasn't able to get wins with him without playing the game. So I moved on. I picked Yoshi one time, and I couldn't win with him either. So I stuck with Raphael in the end. And I just found a few prep gimmicks and like some random EX moves and shit to be able to get by and get wins so that I could just try the game out. And that was my goal because you have such a limited time with the game. Just my goal was to find a character that I could just squeak wins by with just so I could feel the game out. Anyway, so the more I played, the more I learned about the way the system works. And the meter is, when you add a meter to a game that never had meter before, it's a recipe for disaster. And I have to say that the meter works relatively well in theory. And the reason I say in theory is because I've only been able to play with it for such a limited amount of time. But from what I can tell, it seems to work really well. You can stock up to 2 meters. The only things that I know that you can do with meter is guard impact, which is done by back plus soul charge, so ABK. You can guard impact, which takes 50% of 1 meter. You can also do EX moves, which are called brave moves or something, and those are done by, if it's a single command move, like let's say 3B, the command for the EX version of 3B would be 3B followed by soul charge immediately. So like a tilde soul charge, ABK. If it's a string like let's say 66BB, the EX version of that string would be done by 66B then followed by soul charge. So you don't have to do 66BB soul charge if it's a string. But if it's a single command move, you do have to input the extra soul charge. So that takes 50% of 1 meter as well, which I think is very, very good. I think that based on the usefulness and damage of the supers, from what I can tell, compared to the damage of EX moves, EX moves are very, very strong. They seem really good. The damage seems very high. The combo ability seems really high. So because of that, I think the meter system will work well. And the reason I say that is when you have a meter system, but the supers are too valuable, then the meters become kind of unbalanced. What you want to do is kind of what Mortal Kombat did, which is making breakers so valuable that X-rays are almost not worth doing. And what that ends up doing is creating a good meter management flow and system in the game. So I feel like that might happen with Soul Calibur. The supers are very valuable and they do seem good. Some obviously are better than others. Each character has a unique super. So, the concept of the meter seems good to me at this point. Um, One weird thing about the meter though is that if you go down 2 rounds, you automatically get full meter from what I could tell. So let's say my opponent beats me 2 rounds in a row, I start the third round with full meter. And I think there's another circumstance, maybe like if you go down 2-1 or something, you get 1 meter or something like that. But there is a system in place that grants you meter for free, kind of for losing. And that is a comeback mechanic, but um, it doesn't feel that unfair. So I wouldn't go as far as to compare it to something like X Factor or Ultras. Though it is a comeback mechanic, it's not. It doesn't seem too cheesy to me. I hope I don't, pay for this statement later, because who knows what's going to happen in the future. But excuse me. So anyway, another thing that I noticed in the game is um, GIing, which was a kind of foggy to me. I haven't done that much research into the game. I just wanted to play it myself. So I had a lot of questions about the GI system. First of all, the fact that you cannot GI with guard normally, I think will definitely affect the balance of the game. I think that part of the reason why Soul Calibur 2 was so balanced is because every character could GI. Um, Now, you have to use 50% of 1 meter to GI. If you GI something, and you can no longer GI backwards, which I think was called, I think it was repel and parry or something. Anyway, you can't do a back GI anymore. You can only do a forward GI. Even though the command is, from what I remember, back plus soul charge, you still do a forward GI. And it GIs highs, mids, and lows, and all types of attacks, A, B, and K, from what I could tell. It does not do throws. And when you successfully GI someone, they have to have meter in order to re-GI your follow-up. So potentially, you could be getting free attacks after your GI. There is no way for them to do anything about it unless they have meter. So that makes the meter management of the game very interesting, in my opinion. Also, keep in mind, for a meter and a half, you can GI into a super. So that would give you a completely free super. And that's something, though it does take a meter and a half, and in that game, that is a shitload of meter, it's still something you gotta remember. Another thing I noticed about the GI system, since I like jump kicks and I jump kick a lot, I noticed that if your jump kick gets GI'd, for example, I was playing Raphael and I did a 9K and that got GI'd. What happens is you flip through the air in a not air controllable state, and so the opponent gets free hits in the air, potentially landing a juggle. So I thought that was very interesting. That's new. So if you get GI'd while you're doing an airborne move, you fly in the air and can potentially be comboed. And I presume there's no way to re-GI regardless of whether or not you have meter because you're in the air. So that's new and interesting. As far as movement goes, which is a very important factor in all fighting games to me, I felt like some of the characters moved in a very, very sluggish way, while Raphael had a relatively large backdash. So it's definitely not universal, and that could be a good or a bad thing. I felt like in Soul Calibur 4, when I did play it, Siegfried had very poor movement, and the only thing that recovered or redeemed him of this weakness was the fact that he had a GI. But now that GIs cost so much meter, I feel like characters with poor movement who are forced to stand still may struggle, and that could affect balance in a negative way. But speaking of standing still and the general feel of the game, so there are still 8-way run counters and backdash counters, and from what I can tell, they, they are pretty devastating. You can eat, like I was playing against Barry and he plays Maxi, you can eat like 40% for getting hit while sidestepping. For getting hit while sidestepping. And if you consider the danger of sidestepping, that makes you think, oh man, I better sit still. Well, if you sit still and you're blocking all day, you're going to get guard crushed. And in this game, when you get guard crushed, the crushed animation yields the opponent a counter hit. So there are no more critical finishes, but you are going to eat a counter hit when you get guard crushed. And potentially you could eat a super or an EX combo or whatever. So you can't just be sitting still either. So it seems like the way the game was developed, what they want you to do is just attack. Um, there is no GI, so you can't use that. You cannot block all the time because you're going to get crushed, and you cannot be moving around all the time because you're in danger of being counter hit. So the developers of the game seem to be encouraging just offense, or maybe like kind of like a passive-aggressive playstyle at the very least. Turtling seems very difficult in the game. And, that could be a bad thing to some people, but again, that's not necessarily a red flag to me. It's just the way the game seems at this point. But one thing that I noticed that was kind of odd was the guard system. In Soul Calibur 4, if you were flashing red, you could use GIs to reduce your gauge. I don't even know what it's called, the critical gauge or whatever. But now that GIs don't exist, the only way to reduce your gauge is by not blocking. So either getting hit or evading attacks or attacking the opponent. And if you successfully make it through a round without getting crushed, you gain some of that meter back. So the strategies are really interesting. You know, it depends on whether or not you want to sacrifice the round by getting crushed, or, it's really, there's some depth to that system, which I think is kind of interesting. The last thing I wanted to mention is the supers. The way the supers function, you do double fireball and then soul charge, which is ABK. They seem to function really effectively as of right now. The command doesn't, it seems kind of foreign for a Soul Calibur game, but it works well. The only thing that I don't like about the supers right now is that when you do them, you can be hit out of them. But as soon as the flash happens, it seems like it's gonna hit. So if they're doing an attack or if they're not blocking, after the flash occurs, it's gonna connect. However, before the flash, there is a period of time where you input the command, but the flash has not come out yet. And if you get hit during that time, there is no indicator that you successfully did a super, but your meter goes away. And that kind of bugged me a lot. At least there should be some sort of like flash or spark or something letting the player know that I successfully did a super and it was interrupted. Therefore, that is why my meter had just disappeared. Because there were a lot of times where I did the super, I got hit out of it, but I didn't realize that I did the super. So I continued attempting the super, but then when I looked up at my meter, I realized it was gone. So maybe they should add something there to, let you know that you at least attempted a super. Other than that, I mean, the most important thing to me, my goal at SCR was to feel the game out, feel the new system out, see how it works. I'm not really interested in character specifics because all that shit's gonna change. It's an early build and not all the characters are even announced yet. So I'm not really concerned with that. But as far as the system goes, everything functions in a very much acceptable way. So I have no complaints about that. A lot of people ask me how I felt about the game overall. Aesthetically, it looks fantastic. I really like the art direction. I like the darker colors they're using. It just looks really cool, and it better because it's a new game. Um, and as far as my overall opinion of the game, I mean, this is pretty much what I have to say. If I could possibly walk away from SoCal Regionals saying anything bad about Soul Calibur 5, that game would be done for. So, I have nothing bad to say about Soul Calibur 5. It looks really cool, it feels really cool, but I better feel that way about the game. I mean, come on. If it doesn't feel good, even at this point, then they are fucking up bad. So, it's almost like, yeah, I think the game feels great and I'm enjoying it, but that's kind of like giving someone credit for doing their job. Of course it's supposed to feel good at this point. The only way, the only thing that I'm skeptical of is the same thing that I was always skeptical of, and that's balance. So it's going to be very difficult for them to produce a game that's going straight to console and is only being tested by a limited amount of people. It's going to be difficult to make it so that that game is competitively balanced. And especially now that GI doesn't exist in the same way it did before, I'm concerned with the potential of them needing to patch the game. The problem is that patching a game after release is just extremely difficult. The budget for these games is not as big as you would think. And patching a game, I've heard, can cost up to like $30,000 or $40,000. That's a pretty good amount of time, money and time. So, it's going to be very difficult for this game to develop competitively and not need some sort of balancing patch. I'm really hopeful that it doesn't need that, and I'm really hopeful that it ends up good as a competitive game because it feels cool and it looks cool. But again, I'm excited, but I'm skeptical. Uh, Overall, I'm very, very happy with what I played and what I saw, and I'm very much looking forward to playing it. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. I guess I'll say so far so good. But I'm really interested in seeing what they do and where they take the series. Anyway, hopefully that wasn't too long. Subscribe to this YouTube channel, and I guess I'll catch you guys next time. See ya.